Hi, I'm Clara, and I'm an intern at Venk. Today, I'm going to talk about the sexual slavery victims of Japanese Imperial Army, widely known as comfort women. The comfort women refer to some 200,000 women that were seized from their homes, factories, streets, and schools. They were held in either small comfort stations or near frontliners and kept as sexual slaves by the Japanese army, mostly during World War II. There is a compelling set of evidence and testimonies that proves that the Japanese military established a system of military comfort women. Comfort women is an euphemism that involves sexually enslaved women and girls from Korea, the Philippines, Taiwan, China, Indonesia, the Netherlands, and Australia, as well as Japan itself. Testimonies from victims are difficult to hear, and we cannot imagine what these women and girls have been through. These girls and women were forced to receive as many as 30 men per day. Sexual slavery victims of the Japanese military died in unknown numbers due to disease, drug addiction, suicide, and coerced double suicides, where some soldiers would kill themselves and their favorites at the same time. In 1993, the UN Global Tribunal violation of human rights estimates that at the end of World War II, 90% of comfort women had died. However, after the end of World War II, documents on these systems were destroyed by Japanese officials. So the numbers are based on estimates by historians that rely on a variety of extant documents. As Japan rebuilt after World War II, the story of enslavement of women was largely denied. For decades, women who had been forced into sexual slavery became societal outcasts. This history of the comfort woman went undocumented and unnoticed. What about the comfort woman issue in Korea? The comfort woman issue became very important in Korea, a country where there were many sexual slavery victims. After the liberation of Korea from Japanese colonization, and for decades, the history of comfort women was unnoticed in Korean society. In 1965, a treaty between Korea and Japan normalized their relations, but the comfort women were not specifically mentioned, which led to later conflict about whether the claims had been indeed settled. In the early 90s, as Korean society rebuilt, the survivors of sexual slavery started to shape their experiences publicly. Since then, the comfort woman issue has been an ongoing debate between Korea and Japan. Janice Suk Gerson, professor of law at Harvard Law School, states in a very compelling New Yorker article that in 1993, Japan issued the Kono Statement, which admitted the Japanese military's involvement in the comfort stations and in recruiting women against their own will. Japan extended sincere apologies and remorse, but after Prime Minister Shinzo Abe took office in 2006, Japan appeared to back away from the Kono Statement and apologetic stance. Under Abe, the environment in Japan became inhospitable to objective historical inquiry, and the subject of the Japanese military sexual slavery victim, as said by an historian of modern Japan and Korea at the University of Connecticut. A key example was an attempt by the Japanese Foreign Ministry in 2014 to pressure McGraw-Hill to erase several paragraphs of comfort women from one of its world history textbooks, but the publisher refused. In 2015, Japan and Korea reached a new agreement in which Prime Minister Abe expressed his most sincere apologies and remorse to the Japanese military sexual slavery victims. Japan contributed to $8.3 million to a Korean fund to compensate comfort women, and the two governments promised to refrain from accusing or criticizing each other regarding this issue in the international community. But the Korean victims of sexual slavery maintained that their government made this deal without consulting them. The deal was further delegitimized in Korea, and the new president, Moon Jae-in, said that his predecessor's agreement cannot solve the comfort woman issue. Why is it still a relevant subject today? This dark part of history is still subject to many interpretations and denial. We cannot forget about the comfort woman because we need to be sure it won't happen again. As recent as last year, a Harvard professor specializing in corporate law and Japanese legal studies published an article in a journal that sparked indignity within Korean society and international scholars. Indeed, J. Mark Gramseyer stated the comfort woman system was not one in which women were forced into sexual servitude and confined under threat or violence. Gramseyer calls that account pure fiction. Instead, he claims that Korean comfort women chose contracted prostitutions to work at war-front brothels in China and Southeast Asia. Using game theory, he explained that the economic structure of the contract reflected that sex work was voluntarily chosen. However, Gramseyer never found such a contract. Dozens of scholars have written to the journal to prevent it to be published, and the article is now on hold. Wang has made a global petition to protest against Professor Gramseyer's paper and to inform the world about the comfort woman history and issue. You can find it in the description box below. The history of sexual slavery victims, known as comfort women, showcase how we need to learn the right history and events. It shows how easily it is to change historical facts. If we are not careful and if we start to forget about the comfort woman, then some people can manipulate history and crimes and atrocities could happen again. Thank you.